The containment field dissolved in a ripple of blue light, and Rowan Callahan stepped onto the crystalline stage beneath a blinding spotlight. The moment his boots touched the surface, the hum of conversation ceased. 3,000 of the galaxy's wealthiest beings sat in elevated luxury boxes, their forms hidden behind shimmering privacy screens, watching in absolute silence. This was the Deathworld Gala, an event whispered about in criminal circles and denied in official records, where the most dangerous living beings in the universe were sold to the highest bidder. Rowan was the final offering. And he was human. Auctioneer Viwahenth coiled her long serpentine body around the podium, her jeweled scales reflecting the light. "Distinguished collectors," she announced smoothly, "we have saved the greatest treasure for last. Specimen 77 Alpha. A fully mature human male from Earth. 28 standard years. No genetic modification. No behavioral conditioning. Pure baseline stock." The reaction was immediate. Privacy screens flickered as bidders leaned forward. The murmurs swelled into excited chatter. "Starting bid, 10 million credits," Viwahenth continued. "Do I hear? 50 million. 100 million. The numbers escalated before the first bid could settle. Rowan stood motionless, his gray eyes calmly sweeping the room. He wore simple clothes provided by his captors. A gray shirt, dark trousers, heavy boots. No restraints. No weapons. Just a lone human while an entire galaxy debated his price. 500 million, another voice called. The auction hall erupted. Bids overlapped in a chaotic storm, translators struggling to keep pace. A deep, resonant voice from Box 7 cut through the noise. 1 billion credits. Viwahenth's eyes gleamed. "Unprecedented," she hissed with delight. "Never in 3 centuries has a Deathworld specimen inspired such interest. The bid stands at 1 billion. Do I hear 1.5? 2 billion, came a calm response from Box 1, the seat reserved for the most powerful collectors. 2.5, Box 7 countered instantly. Rowan finally spoke. "Before you spend your fortunes," he said evenly, his voice carrying through the hall without amplification, "you should understand what you are buying." Silence crashed down like a physical force. Specimens did not speak. They were property, not participants. Viwahenth recoiled slightly. "Specimen 77 Alpha will remain silent," she snapped. "Bidding continues." "My name," Rowan said, cutting her off, "is Rowan Callahan. And I am not for sale." The words echoed, calm and deliberate, unsettling something deep within the room. The Gala had expected prey. Instead, it had been addressed by a man who did not sound owned at all. The bidding frenzy surged like a storm, voices stacking atop one another as wealth and ego collided. Rowan stood motionless at the center of it all, breathing slow, eyes attentive, cataloging everything. The acoustics of the hall, the rhythm of the auctioneer's pauses, the subtle delay between a bid and its confirmation. When silence finally fell at his words, it landed heavy, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. Specimens were meant to be displayed, not heard. Viwahenth's tongue flicked in irritation as she tried to reassert control, but the moment had already slipped from her grasp. Rowan's gaze lifted toward the private boxes, not challenging, simply observant, as if he were studying weather patterns before a long journey. He spoke again, calmly, deliberately, explaining nothing yet implying everything. Earth was not merely dangerous, he said. It was instructive. Every storm, every predator, every disease had been a teacher. Survival that was never guaranteed, only earned and earned repeatedly. The collectors listened despite themselves. Some leaned closer to their screens. Others shifted back, unsettled by the absence of fear in his voice. The bids slowed, then resumed, higher than before, driven now by curiosity as much as greed. When the auctioneer cited salvage law, Rowan nodded, acknowledging the framework while quietly dismantling it. Laws, he explained, were tools. Tools only worked when both sides understood their limits. He asked simple questions about enforcement, about jurisdiction, about how many civilizations in the room had actually tested those assumptions. No one answered. The silence stretched. The collar around his neck hummed faintly, its control field active, confident. Rowan's fingers brushed it as if absent-mindedly, and then he removed it. Not violently, not dramatically. It came free with a soft click like a solved puzzle. Shock rippled through the hall. Systems that had never failed suddenly meant nothing. Rowan held the collar up for all to see before letting it fall. He spoke of adaptation, of neural redundancy, of bodies shaped by chaos rather than comfort. Humans, he said, did not evolve to dominate, they evolved to persist. Security rushed the stage on command, weapons raised, tactics precise. Rowan did not resist. He waited. He snapped his fingers once. Darkness swallowed the Gala as power died across the station. In that blackness came movement, controlled and silent, followed by the unmistakable sound of human laughter, close, confident, numerous. When the lights returned, the world had changed and everyone in the room knew it. The collectors stared at one another, exposed without their screens, suddenly aware of how fragile their authority looked under open light. Guards lay disarmed, breathing but helpless, arranged deliberately to show restraint rather than slaughter. Rowan stood unchanged at the center, collar gone, posture relaxed. He had not struck a blow, yet the balance of power had shifted completely. Fear crept in where entitlement had lived moments before, and for the first time in the Gala's history, the buyers understood they were no longer the ones setting the price. The auction had become a reckoning. Commander Eliza Thorne stepped forward as if the stage belonged to her, because now it did. Her boots rang sharply against the crystalline floor, the sound cutting through the stunned silence of the hall. Behind her, humans held every access point with disciplined ease, weapons lowered but ready, eyes alert, movements economical. They were not here to posture. They were here to conclude something long overdue. The audience finally understood that the laughter they had heard in the darkness had not been mockery. It had been certainty. Eliza spoke clearly, every word measured, designed to translate cleanly across species and cultures. The arrests were lawful. The evidence was overwhelming. The revised galactic charter was explicit. Sapient trafficking was illegal, regardless of species, regardless of origin world. The collectors protested in a dozen languages, their arguments collapsing under their own contradictions. Some claimed ignorance. Others claimed exemption. A few threatened retaliation. Eliza listened to them all without interruption, then reminded them that threats made under arrest were still admissible as evidence. Rowan stood beside her, no longer the centerpiece, now simply another human among many. That, he realized, was the most unsettling thing for the collectors. He was not unique. He was representative. The aura of rarity they had projected onto him shattered when they looked past him and saw hundreds more, equally calm, equally capable. The idea of owning one human had already driven bids into the billions. The realization that there were billions more was visibly destabilizing. A collector from Box 7 finally spoke, voice subdued, stripped of arrogance. This operation had functioned for centuries. Species had been cataloged, classified, traded. Humans had slipped through the cracks because they were new, underestimated, inconvenient. How, the being asked, had Earth mobilized so quickly? Eliza answered without hesitation. Humans had learned long ago that survival favored preparation. Networks had been watching. Analysts had been cataloging disappearances. Patterns had been mapped. When the evidence reached critical mass, action followed. Rowan added quietly that no human vanished alone. Every missing ship, every lost signal, every silent colony left echoes. Humans listened for those echoes. They were very good at noticing what was missing. That was how Agent Callahan had volunteered. Not because he was expendable but because he was trusted. That distinction mattered. The auctioneer Wealthiest struggled against her restraints, demanding asylum, claiming coercion. Eliza denied the request. Facilitating a crime was not mitigation. Profiting from it was aggravation. Wealthiest fell silent, finally understanding that negotiation was no longer possible. Around the hall, collectors began to comprehend the scope of what was happening. Accounts were frozen. Transmissions blocked. Warrants issued in real time as Allied systems received the broadcast. This was not a raid. It was a statement. Humanity was no longer an unregulated variable on the galactic board. They had learned the rules, amended them, and now enforced them with relentless precision. The Deathworld Gala, once a symbol of dominance over danger, had become evidence in the largest trafficking case in galactic history. As the arrests continued, Rowan looked out over the hall one last time. He felt no triumph, no anger, only resolution. The galaxy had misunderstood humans because humans had allowed it. That era was over. From this night forward, no one would mistake silence for weakness again. The price of that assumption had finally been calculated, and it was far higher than any bid. The trials began weeks later, but the consequences began immediately. Across the galaxy, secure channels lit up with emergency briefings, leaked footage and intercepted panic. The Deathworld Gala was no longer a rumor or a scandal. It was a precedent. Thousands of recordings showed wealthy collectors bidding openly on a sentient being. Thousands of voices confessed intent without realizing they were doing so. Humanity had not merely exposed a crime. It had illuminated a system that had thrived on the assumption that no one powerful enough would ever object. Earth objected. Rowan Callahan returned home quietly. There were no parades, no public medals, no official statements bearing his name. His work had never been about recognition. He submitted his final report, detailing behavioral patterns, security failures, and the psychological profiles of collectors who believed morality could be outbid. Analysts would study that data for decades. Governments would use it to dismantle networks that had existed longer than some civilizations. Rowan took a week of leave, then requested reassignment. There were still humans missing. Commander Eliza Thorne became something else entirely. To the Galactic Council, she was the face of a species that could no longer be ignored. To traffickers, she became a warning. To allies, a reassurance. Earth's provisional membership quickly became permanent, not because humans demanded it, but because no one wanted to explain why a species capable of such coordination was excluded. Humanity did not posture. They documented. They enforced. They followed procedures so meticulously that opposition found no legal ground to stand on. Collectors' Worlds issued apologies. Some sincere. Most strategic. Reparations were offered. Asset seizures followed. Entire fortunes evaporated overnight. Species that had once viewed humans as curiosities revised their threat assessments in silence. The phrase Deathworld disappeared from official records, replaced with a more precise classification: high adaptation origin species. The change was subtle. The implication was not. In underground channels, new rules circulated. Do not traffic humans. Do not detain humans. Do not interfere with humans searching for their own. These rules were not enforced by fleets or declarations. They were enforced by memory. The memory of a single auction collapsing into mass arrest. The memory of a smiling human removing a control collar like it was nothing. The memory of laughter in the dark, followed by absolute control. On Earth, the public learned only fragments. Enough to be proud. Enough to be angry. Enough to support what came next. Budgets shifted. Exploration vessels doubled as search and recovery platforms. Diplomatic missions included legal teams trained specifically in sapient rights violations. Humanity did not become more violent. It became more attentive. Years later, historians would mark the Deathworld Gala as a turning point. Not the moment humans entered galactic society, but the moment the galaxy realized humans had always been part of it, watching, learning, waiting. They had not rushed to dominate. They had waited until dominance was unnecessary. Rowan once summarized it simply in a closed briefing. They thought we were valuable because we survived a hostile world. That wasn't the lesson. The lesson is that we remember who hurts us, and we do something about it. The galaxy learned that lesson well. Because the most dangerous thing about humanity was never their strength or their numbers or their technology. It was that once they decided something mattered, they did not let it go.
Thank you for watching, like, and subscribe.